Okay, I need you to picture something. It's June 2007. The Emmy nominations just dropped. And Katherine Heigl, Grey's Anatomy's Katherine Heigl, is on that list. Best Supporting Actress in a Drama. The whole internet is excited. Her fans are excited. Shonda Rhimes is probably excited. Everything is going exactly the way it's supposed to go for someone who has just become, without much argument, one of the most watched women on American television. Fast forward exactly 12 months. Same Emmy season, different story. Katherine Heigl calls a press conference. Well, she releases a statement and announces she is removing her own name from Emmy consideration. Not because she doesn't want to win, because, she says, the writers didn't give her enough to work with this season to deserve a nomination. And the entire entertainment industry loses its mind. She said, what? Producers are furious. The Grey's writers are furious. ABC executives are furious. The trades run headlines that make her sound like the most ungrateful actress in Hollywood history. And suddenly, the woman who 12 months ago was the sweetheart of Thursday night television has a new title. Difficult. That word. Difficult. It traveled fast, the way that kind of word does when the people who run things decide they want it to travel. And once it landed, on her name, on her reputation, on every casting conversation she wasn't in the room for, it did not let go. Within 3 years, the rom-com offers slowed down. Within 5, the big studio films had mostly dried up. Within 10, and the only thing most people remembered about Katherine Heigl's career wasn't Grey's Anatomy or Knocked Up or 27 Dresses. It was that she was difficult. But here's what I've been thinking about. That word, difficult, who decided that? Who ran the press on that? And what exactly did she do that was so unforgivable? Because I went back and looked at the actual record, not the gossip, the actual quotes, the actual timeline, the actual things she said, and the actual things that happened to her afterward. And I need to tell you, the story you think you know about Katherine Heigl is missing about half of itself. She was not an overnight anything. Katherine Heigl showed up in Hollywood at 17, not with connections, not with a famous family, not with the kind of backstory that gets written into the opening paragraph of a Variety profile. She was from Washington, Connecticut. Her mother managed her. Her first real break was a small part in a forgettable 1992 film called That Night, and then several years of exactly the kind of work that doesn't make anyone famous, supporting roles, TV guest spots, a recurring part on a sci-fi show called Roswell that had a dedicated fan base and almost no mainstream footprint. She spent the better part of a decade being the person you recognize but can't quite place. And then Grey's Anatomy happened. Season 1, 2005. She was cast as Izzie Stevens, the intern who was also a model, which the show acknowledged and then mostly moved past in order to let her be something more interesting. In those first 2 seasons, Izzie was funny and warm, and occasionally furious in exactly the right way. The kind of character that makes you feel like you're watching a real person have a hard week rather than an actress hitting marks. We liked her immediately. I think we forget that now, how much we liked her, how much we looked forward to seeing her on screen. Before any of the noise started, there was just a woman doing very good work on a very popular show, and the audience could feel it. That matters. Hold on to it. Let me place you back in 2006 and 2007, because I think it's important to actually feel where she was before we talk about what happened to her. Grey's Anatomy was not just a hit show, it was a phenomenon. Thursday nights, ABC, 20-something million people watching. Your friends were watching, your co-workers were watching, you were probably watching. And in season 2, the writers gave Izzie Stevens a storyline that broke a lot of people completely open. A love story with a terminal heart patient named Denny Duquette that ended the way those stories always end, with Izzie on the floor in her prom dress and half of America crying in a way they hadn't planned to. Katherine Heigl played that scene in a way that made it feel private, like you were watching something you weren't supposed to see. She won the Emmy in 2007, Best Supporting Actress in a Drama. She walked up to that stage in a gold dress and she thanked her mother and she cried a little, and the applause was real and the room was warm, and everything about that moment suggested a woman at the beginning of a very long, very good run. And in the same year, literally the same 12 months, she went widescreen. Knocked Up. Judd Apatow with Seth Rogen. A studio comedy with a $30 million budget that made nearly $220 million worldwide. She was the female lead. She was charming and grounded, and she held the center of that film in a way that made you understand why they cast her. Overnight, she wasn't just a TV star anymore. She was the rom-com lead Hollywood had been looking for. Smart enough for women to take seriously, warm enough for everyone else to fall for. 27 Dresses came out in January 2008, The Ugly Truth in July 2009. At her peak, she was on the cover of magazines, headlining films, commanding the kind of salary that signals you have officially arrived. She was, and this is not hyperbole, one of the most commercially valuable actresses in Hollywood. We all thought she was just getting started. Here is where I need you to pay attention, because the next part of the story moves quickly, and the speed is part of how it worked. The first thing she said. It was December 2007. Knocked Up had been out for 6 months. It was still being talked about, still being celebrated. And Katherine Heigl sat down for a profile in Vanity Fair, and she said something that, in the context of 2024, sounds almost unremarkable. She said the film was, quote, a little sexist. She said the women were portrayed as shrews, humorless, and uptight, while the men got to be lovable, goofy, fun-loving. And then, this part always gets left out. She said it was also one of the best filming experiences of her career. That's the full quote. Both parts. What ran in the headlines was one part. Here's the thing about that. Go back and watch Knocked Up right now in 2026 and tell me she was wrong. I'll wait. Because a lot of women watching that film in 2007 felt exactly what she said but didn't have a public platform to say it from. She had the platform. She used it. And the response from the industry was swift and disproportionate and disguised as wounded professionalism. Seth Rogen said years later he felt betrayed. Judd Apatow said it hurt his feelings. Two of the most powerful men in Hollywood comedy used the word hurt to describe their reaction to a woman, pointing out a pattern in how the film wrote its female characters, and the press ran with their version. The second thing she said. June 2008, Emmy season. She releases a statement withdrawing her name from contention. I want to read you the actual statement because I think you should hear the real words and not the headline version. I did not feel that I was given the material this season to warrant an Emmy nomination, and in an effort to maintain the integrity of the Academy organization, I withdrew my name from contention. In addition, I did not want to potentially take away an opportunity from an actress who was given such materials. Now, when I read that for the first time, I didn't read it as an attack. I read it as a person making a quietly self-aware decision and trying to explain her reasoning badly. She was too honest about her own assessment. She said the part out loud that most actors think but would never say publicly. The Grey's writers did not see it that way. The New York Times ran the story under the headline, Star Shuns Emmys. The angering producers. A BC executives gave quotes to trades describing their disappointment. The narrative that crystallized, fast and with a lot of institutional support, was that Katherine Heigl had publicly humiliated the writers of the show that made her famous. She said years later, I ambushed them. I should have said nothing, or I should have called them first. And I believe her that she regrets the delivery. I do. But I want to ask a different question. If a male actor had quietly declined an Emmy nomination and cited the quality of his material, would that move have ended careers? Would it have traveled the same way? Would the word difficult have attached itself to his name in every industry conversation for the next decade? You already know the answer. The third thing she said. July 2009. David Letterman. She's promoting The Ugly Truth. And she mentions, sort of offhandedly, like someone who has been holding something for a long time and finally just says it, that the first day back on set after the writer's strike, the Grey's crew worked a 17-hour day. I'm going to keep saying this because I hope it embarrasses them, she told Letterman. A 17-hour day, which I think is cruel and mean. The audience laughed a little. Letterman moved on, but the industry did not move on. This was 2009. The phrase toxic workplace did not exist yet in the cultural vocabulary. There was no hashtag #MeToo. There was no Glassdoor review for TV sets. The understood agreement was that you worked the hours you were given and you were grateful for them, and you did not, under any circumstances, tell a late-night audience that your employer was being cruel. But that was the rule. Unwritten, absolute. She broke it. In 2024, CNN ran a piece with the headline, "Katherine Heigl was right all along." I want to let that sit for a second. The woman who was punished professionally for describing a 17-hour workday as cruel in a business that has since had multiple headline scandals about exploitative working conditions was right. She was just right several years before the culture was ready to hear it. What happened next? Here is how the industry actually works when it decides someone is difficult. There's no memo, no formal blacklist, no meeting where executives sit around a table and agree to stop hiring someone. It's softer than that, and harder to prove, and more effective for both reasons. The phone just stops ringing the way it used to, and the offers that come in start to be slightly smaller than before. The directors who were enthusiastic become less available. The studio projects that had her name attached quietly get recast, and the word that was circulating in rooms she wasn't in, difficult, starts doing the work that a blacklist used to require an actual list to do. Business Insider reported in 2023 that she described feeling betrayed when the industry turned on her, that she had thought the people she worked with were genuinely on her side, that the speed with which her reputation collapsed left her genuinely confused about what she had done wrong. What she had done wrong was say 3 true things at the wrong time in the wrong industry. That's it. That's the whole list. The films after 2010 didn't perform. Life as we know it, New Year's Eve, one for the money. Or there were reasons for each one, the scripts, the timing, the competition, but the narrative that had attached itself to her name was available as an explanation for all of them, and the press used it every single time. Katherine Heigl's latest film underperforms. Is her reputation hurting the box office? There's a specific cruelty in that framing, because by the time a reputation has been weaponized against someone, every bad outcome gets attributed to the reputation, and every piece of evidence gets fed back into the machine that made the reputation in the first place. You can't outrun it. You can't disprove it. The only options are to keep trying inside a system that has already decided who you are, or to stop. She stopped. Not all at once. There were TV projects. State of Affairs on NBC lasted 1 season. Sure, Doubt on CBS was canceled after 2 episodes aired. Hollywood has a specific way of giving someone a second chance that still functions as a closed door, a show with a mediocre slot, an undermarketed pilot, a project that almost no one sees and therefore can be pointed to as further evidence of the narrative, rather than a genuine opportunity. And then she moved to Utah. A farm, not a weekend retreat, an actual relocation. Her husband Josh Kelly, their 3 kids, horses, dogs, chickens, land. She got quiet in a way that wasn't strategic. She wasn't building a brand around simplicity or selling a lifestyle or doing the thing that celebrities sometimes do when they leave LA, which is leave LA loudly enough that everyone still knows they left. She just went. She said in interviews that the years of operating under that label, difficult, ungrateful, the bad guy, had done something to her sense of herself. That she had internalized it in ways she didn't fully understand, until she was far enough away from it to see clearly, that she had spent years apologizing constantly, working to manage every perception, exhausted by the performance of not being the person they said she was. I was ashamed, she said, and I carried it for a long time. We stopped seeing her, and I think most of us, honestly, assumed the narrative must have been true, because that's what narratives do when they're told often enough and loud enough, and by enough people with enough power. They become the default explanation. They become the thing we reach for when we stop thinking about it. She was difficult. That's why she disappeared. Except that was never the full story. In 2017, she joined the cast of Suits as Samantha Wheeler. It was a quieter comeback than she probably deserved. Not a film, not a prestige project, not the thing that gets a press tour and a magazine cover. But it was work. Good work. And she was good in it. Confident, precise, with the kind of ease that comes from someone who has learned to be comfortable taking up space rather than managing how much space she appears to be taking. And then came Firefly Lane. If you haven't watched Firefly Lane on Netflix, and if you're the kind of person who watched Grey's Anatomy on Thursday nights in 2006, there's a reasonable chance you have. It is a show about two women who have been best friends since they were teenagers in the 1970s, and what their friendship looks like across the decades, through marriages and careers and grief, and all the things that happen to women that television used to not bother with. She plays Tully Hart, the one who became famous, the one whose public image and private self have never quite matched up. The one who spent years performing a version of herself for an audience and eventually had to figure out who she was when the cameras were off. You do not have to work hard to feel the resonance of that casting. Her performance in Firefly Lane is what it looks like when an actor stops trying to prove something and just does the work. She is warm and funny, and specifically sad in exactly the right moments. The women who found that show, and they found it in the millions, did not come to it thinking about Emmy controversies or Judd Apatow press cycles. They came to it for the story, and they stayed because of her. She's still in Utah. She has said she does not miss Los Angeles in the way she expected to. That the distance gave her something she couldn't access when she was inside the machine, a version of herself that wasn't constantly being processed through what other people needed her to be. She said recently, "I spent so many years apologizing. I'm done apologizing for having opinions." She didn't say it defiantly. She said it matter-of-factly, the way you say something that took a long time to figure out and now just seems obvious. There's something that bothers me about this story, and I want to say it plainly. The things Katherine Heigl said, the things that ended her standing in the industry, that attached that word to her name, that made producers and directors and studios quietly cross her off their lists. Those things were not wrong. A $200 million film that writes its women as humorless and uptight while the men get to be goofy and lovable is, in fact, a little sexist. A 17-hour shooting day is, in fact, cruel. A performer choosing not to submit for an award she didn't feel she'd earned is, in fact, a reasonable decision. None of those things were wrong. They were just said by a woman about men who had power in an industry that had a very efficient system for dealing with that. Here's what I keep coming back to. Every young actress who has declined to submit for an award in the years since, every woman on a set who has told a producer that the hours are unreasonable, every female lead who has pushed back on how her character was written, they could do those things more safely because someone paid the price before them. That doesn't make what happened to Katherine Heigl okay, but it means it wasn't nothing. It meant something, even when it cost everything. She's 47 years old. She's working. She's raising her kids on a farm in Utah and making television she's proud of. And, by every account, building something quieter and more durable than what the machine was offering her at the height of it. She said the quiet part out loud, twice, 3 times, and the quiet part, eventually, slowly, after enough women said it enough times, became something we all just say now. That's not nothing either.